Hey everybody, Dr. Joe's in the house again on this wonderful Wednesday evening here in the Washington, D.C. area. I hope it's good wherever you are. The weather's fine. And I hope you had a great week. Yeah, I had a good week as usual and taking care of some stuff. Got some rent increases approved. And yeah, renovating one house here in Washington, D.C., one of my rental houses. The tenant's been there about 15 or 16 years now. And so we decided to upgrade the kitchen and bathrooms, and it's going well. We should wrap that up in about another couple of weeks. And I spoke to one of my tenants today, and she reminded me that she's been there 10 years. So she'll be with me for 10 years, July the 1st. And so surprising. I mean, this stuff works if you can do it right, and if you can drive your turnover cost down, then the cash flow stays in your pocket, or the turnover cost, which can be huge, 2-3 months lost income, can stay in your pocket. So yeah, so it's I just thought I'd share that with you. Two different tenants. One's 15 or 16 years now, and the other one is 10 years in a couple of months. So kudos to Miss Charles. Okay, so let's get down today. We're going to talk about crafting a solid lease agreements, and I thought it'd be a good topic to talk about because at the end of the day, if you're renting properties, you're probably going to, well, hopefully you have a lease or rental agreement with your tenant. And a lot of people, surprisingly, don't have leases. It's just like a verbal handshake. And some people that do have leases, it's very kind of, let's just say, very vague and not very thorough. My leases are 20 pages long. 20 pages is very detailed, very thorough. And that's based on, 35 years of stuff going on. But if you want to buy that lease, you can go to my website and buy that one. But I'm not selling that today. But I just thought it's a good topic to have about lease. I get a lot of questions about leases. Dr. Joe, can I have your lease? Dr. Joe, what should I have in my lease? Dr. Joe, lease. So I just thought I'd do a session just focused on helping you craft a solid lease agreement. So let's get to it then. So are you leaving your investments properties exposed because of a weak lease? Many new, intermediate, and seasoned investors unknowingly, that's a good one, gamble with their future, financial future, because they're relying on a poorly crafted lease agreements. Okay, just kind of I just got basic templates and things like that. In residential real estate, a lease is really not just paperwork. It's really the cornerstone. It's the cornerstone of long-term success. Without it, even the most promising investments can unravel due to tenant disputes, property damage, or payment issues. I mean, they're the most common things. There's a dispute between you and the tenant about something. They could have caused some damage, not paying rent. They could have had wild parties going on. They could have more people than is agreed to. There's a lease violation. That's essentially what's taking place. And it's a dispute. And if you're going to have to deal with that, if you have to go to court, then the chances are the judge is going to ask to see your lease. And you have to be able to explain what the violation is that this tenant has caused you. So a rock-solid lease defines the terms of the relationships. It protects your rights and keeps your rental business running smoothly, even when challenges arise. So what we're going to talk about today is uncover some of the lessons learned from successful myself and, unfortunately, some unsuccessful investors. We're going to do a deep dive into strategies and setbacks that they faced, that I faced, and then really lay out a clear actionable steps that you can take to craft lease agreements that truly protects your interests and something that you can have as you scale your business. So whether you're managing a handful of properties or just looking for one property, or looking to build a portfolio, mastering the art of lease agreements, in my opinion, it's non-negotiable. It's a non-negotiable skill for sustainable and scalable success. As I said before, I have a 20-page lease, and it's very thorough, and it it really does address most of the issues and situations that I've come across. Yeah, it works. It's not one of those boilerplate that you get from the local, I don't know, Walmart or Target or, Home Depot. It's a real thorough lease that has, been reviewed by attorneys and so on. Anyway, so let's, as usual, I broke it down to 6 parts today. We're going to break our live stream to 6 parts. And also I'm going to close it out with a conclusion. Before I get too far, as usual, if you got some questions, please, enter your questions in the chat box, and I'll get to them in about 20 minutes or so. Anything to real estate investing, put them in the chat box, and I'll get to them there. And also, if you want to book a one-on-one with me where you can do a deep dive into any real estate issues, challenge, problems that you're facing, feel free to go to my website, www.joeasamoah.com. You'll see a button for Ask Dr. Joe. Ask Dr. Joe. Just press that and schedule a one-on-one where we can talk about your issues, problems, and hopefully you can leverage my experiences. There's no point in going through challenges alone. And I had a good session with Femi last week. And it's very helpful to be able to leverage the experience of other people who may have a perspective that you may not even thought about. Okay, let's get going then. Understanding the true purpose, of a lease, I think that's important. So the question that you may want to ask is, why is a lease more than just a contract, and how does it shape your investment success from day one? Why is a lease? A lease is more than just a contract. Well, technically it is a contract, but it establishes the relationships. And so what's the purpose? So, too many investors treat a lease as a routine formality. It's just something we're going to put together, and just get everyone done with. In reality, your lease defines the relationship between you and your tenant. It also sets clear expectations, outlines obligations, and gives you the legal backing when things go wrong. If you go to court, as I said before, the judge is going to want to see your lease. And, if it's a weak lease, you may lose your case. If it's a strong lease, it gives you the backing that hopefully you can win the case. Now, obviously, there's certain things that you can have in the lease and certain things which, you can't have, or not so much can't have. You can put whatever you want in the lease. It may not be what we call enforceable. So, for instance, if I say to the tenants, well, I require that you call your children Joseph, Dr. Joe, that's in the lease. And if they don't, technically they're violating the lease. But if I was to take them to court because their child is not called Dr. Joe, there's a pretty good chance that, the judge is not going to enforce that part of the lease. So there's certain things that you can include in the lease. That's, you can put whatever you want, but it may not be enforceable. So it's really important that what you have in your document is enforceable, and you may want to review it with your attorney. So successful investors have learned that treating the lease is almost like a shield, not just a form. It can dramatically reduce problems down the road. And you will have problems as a landlord. Things go wrong. And it's always good to have, a shield that can help you. The lease acts as a guidebook for tenants. It tells them, the tenants, exactly what behavior is expected and what are the repercussions, are for violations. So by focusing on clarity, which means that it's clear, not mumbo jumbo legalese stuff. That's very, very important. And so by focusing on clarity, protection, and enforceability, that's that word again, enforceability, the ability to actually enforce this lease, seasoned investors create an environment, where tenants know the rules from the start. And one thing I've learned is that failed leases often stem from vagueness, loopholes, or even relying too heavily on standard templates without customization. So you get one of these online one-page leases, and you customize it by putting your name and the address of the property, and that's it. It's vague. It's probably too many loopholes in there. It doesn't address a whole lot of things. And if you rely on those templates, there's a chance that the situation may arise which is not addressed in your lease, and therefore it becomes a matter of your word against their word, and so on. So those oversights often lead to misunderstandings that can snowball into costly disputes. And I'm all about not having disputes. I'm all about having happy tenants. And if you've got situations and problems, you can try to work it out. So the difference between the good, the bad, and the ugly really often boils down to who treated their lease as a strategic weapon versus those who saw it as an afterthought. So you see the lease as a clear, very, very important part of your arsenal, as opposed to, something which I've just got to deal with. So a well-structured lease proactively addresses what-ifs scenarios of rental property ownership, insulating you from many of the common headaches. I think I said that story where many years ago, I had a tenant who had a cookout at my property. Rather than having a cookout outside, she had a cookout on the inside of the house, and crazy. I mean, you think, who does that? Well, she did. And so they were there having a good time, partying or cooking out in the living room and dining room, and the smoke detectors blaring off all over the place. And she called me and said, hey, she didn't call me Dr. Joe. She just says, hey, the alarms are going off, and I think we got something going on here. And I said, well, anyway, the bottom line is that she was having a cookout. And so I had to advise her that that's not something that you do. Anyway, needless to say, in my lease now, you cannot cook out inside the house. It's crazy, but this is what it is. There are lots of what-if scenarios that you don't think makes any sense, but it's good to have, because technically, if I didn't have that, then there's no, I won't have any recourse because it's not in the lease. So what are some of the action items that you can take as part of the understanding the purpose of a lease? Treat your lease as an investment protection tool, not just a bureaucratic requirement. Make clarity a priority. Avoid vague language, and think through real life scenarios and ensure that your lease at least tries to address them. So that's number one, which is understanding the true purpose of the lease. Now that we understand the purpose, we're going to go to number two, which is customizing your lease to match your property and tenant profile. Okay. So the question is, what happens when you fail to tailor your lease to the property or the tenant type, and how can you fix it? Okay. So the point here is that a one-size-fits-all leases, in my opinion, are a recipe for headaches. Okay. A luxury condo or a commercial building should look different from a single family or a Section 8 rental, either in the city or in the suburbs, because the situations are different. And so investors who customize their leases to match their property type. I have single families, so there's certain things in single families which are unique to single families, and certain things that in multi-family which are unique, or even I don't know what you call those things, the mobile homes. I mean, there's certain things about them that's unique and they're different, and so you want to try to match the type of property that you have with the lease that makes the most sense. Also, even the tenant profile, you may want to address. For example, Taylor, I have a lot of rentals, which I rent to Section 8. So it's important that my lease addresses some of the uniqueness of Section 8, whether it be there's two portions to the rent. There's a portion from the housing authority and there's a portion for the tenant. In Section 8, they have to recertify once a year or once every 2 years. In Section 8, you have to do an inspection once a year, once every 2 years. So these things are unique to Section 8 that you don't have in market rentals, or you don't have in commercial buildings, because you're renting to a Section 8 voucher holder and the rules are different slightly. So you got to customize that to address those issues. What happens when the tenant doesn't recertify? Okay, to me, that's a lease violation. But if I had a regular, lease, it wouldn't address that, because most tenants don't have vouchers and so forth. So again, it's really important to customize so that you have a really smoother operations and fewer conflicts. So tailoring your leases ensures that you anticipate and control for the unique challenges each property and tenant type may have. And successful landlords like you and I add property-specific clauses like lawn maintenance or for single-family house, or guest restrictions for multifamilies, and tenant-specific adjustments like special addendums for Section 8 in their leases. A lease that reflects the realities of the property and the tenant relationship is far more likely to prevent misunderstandings and conflict. So investors who skip this step often discover too late that their leases just doesn't adequately cover the key issues. That's unique to their situation. It's too late at this point. For example, properties with shared utilities or common areas require extra considerations that generic leases may overlook. The ugly truth is that many costly disputes could have been prevented simply by having better lease customization. So what are some of the action items that you can do? Include clauses that address key responsibilities like utilities, maintenance, and guest policies. Adjust your lease for Section 8 or subsidized housing requirements, if applicable, and consult an attorney familiar with local laws to review your customized leases. It's always good to have an attorney, some legal person to review it to make sure that the lease that you have is compliant with local laws and obviously compliant with local, state, and federal laws and so forth. Because some laws are in DC are not in other jurisdictions, and likewise, there's certain things in Texas that DC doesn't really have to deal with, and vice versa. So you want somebody, an attorney who's local, who understands the laws locally, to kind of review your lease to make sure that you have all the key addendums and verbiage in those leases. Okay, number 3, building a clear and enforceable terms. So building clear and enforceable terms in your lease. So the question is, are your lease terms strong enough to be enforceable in court if needed? Here's the word again, enforceable. It's not just enough to have a quote unquote tough lease, it sounds good or sounds tough. It needs to be able to stand up in court under legal scrutiny. So investors who learn the hard way often find that loosely worded clauses give tenants loopholes or make enforceable very, very difficult. So clear, specific language isn't just helpful, it's really critical when dealing with tenants who test boundaries. And you'll have tenants who will push the envelope, see how far they can go, and try to get away with certain things, either paying, not paying, or paying, and see kind of how you respond. So a rock-solid lease uses simple, clear language that a judge could easily interpret. And it defines key terms like rent due dates, late fees, maintenance responsibilities, notice periods. All these things are defined in the lease, or should be defined in the lease. It really should leave little room for interpretation, which reduces the chances of a judge siding against you if a dispute ends up in court. So you want the document to be interpreted in such a way that hopefully it protects you. Successful investors learn that ambiguity, where it's kind of a gray area, is the enemy, and that a legally tested lease brings power and protection. And tenants are less likely to dispute terms when they are straightforward, and enforcement becomes quicker, cheaper, and hopefully easier. When enforcement is necessary, an unclear lease turns an easy case into an expensive battle. So what are some of the action items here? Use plain, specific language for all major terms in your lease. Spell out deadlines, penalties, and procedures. Avoid vague references to, quote, things like reasonable or acceptable behavior. You need to find what that means. What does reasonable mean? What does acceptable mean? Have your lease reviewed by a landlord-tenant attorney in your local jurisdiction before using it. That's my recommendation. We're kind of halfway through. As usual, if you've got some questions, put them in the chat box. I'll get to them in about 10 minutes. If it's to do with real estate, please put them there. And any problems, challenges that you're facing, feel free to throw it in there, and I'll try to get to them in about 10, 15 minutes from now. If you need more time, you want to do a real deep dive in your situation, then obviously you can always book a one-on-one directly with me. Just go to my website, www.joeasamoah.com, www.joeasamoah, and press the button for Ask Dr. Joe. Ask Dr. Joe. You can book a one-on-one, and we can go down to it and do a deep dive in your situation. Any problems, any challenges that you're facing. Okay, moving on to number 4. For 6, incorporating must-have clauses. Must-have clauses. Certain things that you do is very important to have in your lease. So what clauses separate the amateurs from the pros? That's what you may be asking. Well, a lease missing essential clauses is like an umbrella full of holes. Investors who survived worst case tenant situations learned the value of key clauses in the document. Things like right of entry. Do you have the right of entry? How much notice do you need to give before you move into it, or at least go into the property for whatever reason, whether it be change the filter or maintenance issue or repair issue? Do you address that in terms of right of entry? Maintenance responsibilities. Your lease should make sure that who's responsible for what. Are they responsible for things like if the refrigerator breaks down, if the appliances break up, or if there's something wrong with the plumbing, there's a stoppage? I mean, who's responsible? Limits on occupancy. How many people live there? I define in my lease, I've got clauses in there which clearly states who name the people who are authorized to reside in the property, name by name. Anybody who's not on that there, technically they don't have the right to stay there. There may be a guest, but there's a definition for guest. My situation is a guest is somebody who can stay up to 14 days. Again, this is in my lease. Pet rules. Do you allow pets? Yes or no? What are the limitations, if there are any, in terms of size, in terms of breed, and so on? Do you go charge a pet fee if you do have a pet or not? Rent due dates. When's the rent due? Grace period. How much time do they have before you charge a late fee? And how's the late fee structured? So these are really important clauses to have because each clause is a defensive wall, really, that guides or guards you against specific tenant behaviors that could hurt your business. The pros also include clauses, things like tenant insurance requirements. Do you require tenant insurance? Pest control responsibility. Who's responsible if they get rodents or roaches and other things like that? And what happens during the lease renewals? Or even what happens during a property sale if you decide you want to sell? That should be addressed in the lease. Those things. So these seemingly small details can make a huge difference in preserving your property and protecting your profits. Because those who fail to include these, these things have learned the hard way that what isn't written isn't enforceable. So let me just say it again: what isn't written isn't enforceable. If it's not in your lease, it's going to be tough to enforce those things. Especially in front of a judge and so on. So once issue arises, it's really too late to add clauses retroactively because you got a dispute and the tenant's probably not going to sign something after the fact that they feel they have the right to do. So you're stuck, and now you're scratching your head, getting frustrated because your lease doesn't address certain things. So adding protective clauses from the start can mean the difference between winning or losing thousands of dollars in a dispute. So what are some of the action items associated with incorporating must-have clauses? Add clear languages about rent payments, late fees, or bounced checks. Define maintenance duties, who's responsible for what, who's responsible for the lawn, pest control, appliance maintenance, etc. Include a right of entry clause for repairs and inspection. You do have the right, as long as it's in the document, to go into the property once you give sufficient notice. Okay, moving on to number 5 of 6. Got 2 more to go. Setting expectations early and often. It's important to set expectations. And so I suppose the question is, how does setting expectations during the lease signing, when they're moving in, improve long-term tenant relationships? I set expectations. I go through what I'm expecting from the tenant, go through some aspects of the lease with the tenant, to make sure we're on the same page, make sure there's no misunderstanding, and they know what the rules are from the get-go. So the lease isn't just for emergencies. It's your first opportunity to set the tone. Successful investors use the lease signing process to clearly walk tenants through expectations and consequences. Because if you don't stress what your expectations are and the consequences, they may not know. So it's important that you're proactive So this proactive communications builds trust and prevents many issues, before they even start, because you're on the same page as to what's expected, what's the do's and don'ts and things like that. So investors who skipped the quote unquote expectation talk often find tenants genuinely, they may just not know, unaware of the rules, creating tension and potential conflict later on. So explaining key terms face to face in front of them, going through, yes, it takes some time, but it's really, really worth it. And it lets the tenants know that certain things are very, very important, and they have to take it seriously. So, it may take an extra 15, 20, 30 minutes or an hour, to go through some of these clauses and paragraphs in the lease or key sections of the lease. But, it's really a bit more work on the front end, saves you so much time and aggravation on the back end. At least in my opinion, to stronger, better relationships, more respectful landlord-tenant relationships as well. So trust is built through clarity. You build trust and confidence with your tenants, and tenants are more likely to stay long-term because they understand what the rules are right from the get-go. So the bad and ugly often come from assuming tenants read and understand everything without guidance, and that's not true. Some people are so eager to move in, they'll just sign whatever. They don't read the small fine print. And when you come back later on and say, you can't do this, you can't do this, they're going to say, well, you never told me. So if it's important, I think it's really essential that you kind of go through those clauses or those sections of the, of the lease in person and line by line. So what are some of the action items associated with setting expectations early and often? Review key clauses with tenants during the lease signing process. Set clear expectations about rent, maintenance, and communications. And also answer any tenant questions you have that they may have up front. And finally, number 6, preparing common tenant challenges. Preparing for common tenant challenges. It's never smooth sailing. You're going to have some problems and challenges. That's just the way it goes. So the question then becomes, what safeguards should your lease have to handle things like late payments, damages, and lease violations? As I said, no matter how strong your screening process, challenges will happen. It is just you're dealing with human beings, and so life happens. People are people. So investors who built strong safeguards into their leases manage these situations far more easily than those people who don't. They include things like clear late fee structures. This is how much it's going to cost you if the rent is not paid by this date. We're going to have a lease, late fee on this and on this date for this amount and so forth. Also for things like security deposits and, what's the process for that? And it's important to go through that. I always like to check the condition of the property with the tenant on the day of move-in, and they sign off on that. And the reason why they sign off on it is that they can't say, well, this wasn't working when I first moved in, because they've confirmed that it was working. So having those things in place, you have mechanisms to deal with damages that may come through when the tenant moves out, and so on. So planning ahead for the inevitable is a hallmark of seasoned investors. So by clearly outlining steps for violations, damages, and non-payment in the lease, you can reduce emotions, yes, and enforce rules systematically and legally. Strong leases serve as an objective authority when conflicts arise. By having a what-if mindset when drafting leases, these investors, you and I, protect themselves, and we kind of maintain leverage because we have the law on our sides. So those who didn't prepare found themselves scrambling and often losing time, money, and control when disputes occur. So a solid lease really does mean you're ready for the inevitable ups and downs. And the action items specify in your lease things like late payment fees, return check fees, define what is meant by normal wear and tear versus tenant damage, outline the process for lease violation remediation, and so forth. So that's pretty much it in terms of that part. I'll just kind of wrap it up with a conclusion. So in residential real estate investing, your lease isn't just paperwork. It's your first line of defense, your operational blueprint, and your peace of mind. Yeah. Crafting a rock-solid lease requires intentionality. You got to be intent about it, attention to detail, and a willingness to learn from the experience of others. It's not glamorous. It's just the way it is, but it's absolutely essential for sustainable success, in my opinion. Investors who master lease creation and enforcement, kind of position themselves to thrive through good markets and bad. The lower the risk, it does lower your risk, really. It enhances tenant relationships and also protects your income streams. So those who ignore solid leases, you're kind of inviting unnecessary problems, disputes, and financial losses. So if you're serious about scaling your rental portfolio and building true wealth, you must start by getting your leases right. So don't leave your financial future exposed. Take control with a lease that shields, supports, and strengthens your business. My friends, that is it. So we're going to Q&A shortly. So if you got some questions, please put them in the chat box. I'll get them in a second. Anything to do with real estate, any challenges, problems that you're having, put them in down here, and I'll get to them very, very shortly. And likewise, if you need to do a deep dive, where we can go down to a problem or a challenge that you're facing, or maybe a deal that you want to have someone review, you can book a one-on-one session with me. You can shoot me an email. You can also communicate with me by shooting me an email. My email address is joe@joeasamoah.com, joe@joeasamoah.com. And again, to book a one-on-one Zoom session with me, go to my website, www.joeasamoah.com, www.joeasamoah.com. You can press the button saying Ask Dr. Joe, and I will do my best to provide you with great information, quality insights, and just leveraging my experience from doing this for the last 35 years. There really aren't too many scenarios I haven't seen. And I've seen some crazy scenarios over my time. Okay, so let's get down to the questions, and let's have a little comments. There we go. Okay, so Nesto, this is awesome podcast. Sorry, Dr. Joe. I like the way you answer our questions at the end. I've told all my landlord friends to subscribe and tune in. Oh, thank you, Nestor. I appreciate it. And I think you were on last week, Nestor. Rocket Mortgage told me that they do not loan money to people who have their homes in LLC. Oh, no, they canceled your loan. Yeah, so it sounds like they, some lenders, especially the ones that are like Fannie Mae oriented lenders who kind of sell to the secondary market, they want the lease in your name as opposed to your entity. So there are pros and cons with having your your loan in your name or your entity and how it's titled. Typically if it's in your personal name, then it's easy to get financing. You can usually borrow more money, and the rates are usually cheaper. You can usually get like 30-year financing, 15-year financing. Whereas in commercial, they do allow you to buy it in your entity, but typically they most of the time are they're sort of adjustable rate loans with 5 or 7 year resets, and as opposed to 15 or 30 years, and the interest rates are usually a bit higher, and so on. So there are pros and cons, and I don't think I need to go through the details of that, but it's just unfortunate that you done that. If you're going to keep it in your LLC, then you may want to consider DSCR loans. I have a lender that's pretty good at that one. You may want to consider commercial loan. That may be worthwhile sometimes, and so on. So if you want to keep it in your LLC, if you want to transfer it and take advantage of the lower rates with residential, then depending on the jurisdiction that you're in, you may be subject to transfer taxes, recordation taxes, which can be hefty. I know in the DC area, it's kind of hefty, but it could be worthwhile to have it in your personal name. I know that some people will say, well, Dr. Joe, what about asset liability, asset protection, and things like that? That's true. So you're going to have to factor that in as well and make a decision what makes the most sense for you. So if you can't do it Rocket Mortgage, Nesta, then you may want to consider another lender. There are plenty of lenders out there. There are DSCR loans if you want to keep it in your LLC, or you can go to commercial lender, which are usually local to the area that you're in. I'm not too sure where you're located, Nesta, but anyway. Just when I was about to close, they said I would have to convert my LLC into my name. I told them to go kick rocks. Well, it depends. I wouldn't. Well, it's too late now, but I would have kind of weighed in and done the pros and cons of that. I have some properties in my my personal name. I have some in LLCs. It just depends on the situation. And so I would have done the analysis, and the pros and cons before I just dismiss it, Nestor. And also the cost. How much would it cost you to transfer it from your LLC? Was it too prohibitive, or is very cheap? Depending on your state that you're in, the costs vary quite a bit. Anyway, it is what it is. So now, I suppose, I don't know what type, if you're trying to rent this property or whether you're trying to rehab it or what, Nesta, but you do have some choices, and feel free to clarify, and I can do a further deep dive and so on. Okay, greetings from Phoenix, Dr. Joe. Okay, how you doing, Dow 2? Hope you're doing well in Phoenix. I'm sure it's nice and toasty over there. Ready. Hi, Dr. Joe. I'm currently in the due diligence phase of potentially purchasing a multiplex apartment building with a partner as an investment. Okay, got you so far. You're thinking of buying a commercial building and with using possibly a partner with you. Okay, so from your experience, what are the most important factors you'll evaluate at this stage, both in terms of the property itself and the partnership structure? Good one. And then you said, are there any red flags or best practices you'd recommend watching for? I think I may do a session on partnerships, because partnerships, I've had mixed results with those things. And, at the end of the day, it's a marriage. And, I've been married, 30 years now, 31 years. And sometimes my thing is that if you marry the right person, you're okay. If you don't, it's tough. So if you're going to go to partnership with somebody, if you're almost like a marriage, and this is the kind of person that you want to have a long-term business relationship with, is this somebody that you can work with? How do they respond when the going gets tough? Some people, I'm very level-headed. So, things are going wrong, or, walls are caving in. I can keep my cool and stay focused on the prize. Some other people can't. They're just all over the place. They're up and down. They're freaking out. They're, getting stressed out. They're shouting, cursing, fighting. I'm not that way. And it's hard for me to do business with people like that. So that personality conflict, what do they bring to the table versus what you bring to the table? Is there sort of a synergy there? So a lot of things come into play with a partnership that could be good and also could be a potential warning sign. I've done a couple of partnerships in the past, and they had mixed results. So let's just leave it like that. So I tend to do most of my stuff by myself. But I understand in your situation, you're buying an apartment building, and you may not have the funds to pull all that stuff together. That's why, maybe that's the reason why you're having a partnership. So, so there's nothing wrong with partnerships. Just do the due diligence with the partner, first of all, and learn more about them and their personality, their style, their method of operations, and things like that. That's on the partner, and also their financial strength. In the event that something happens financially, can they pick up the pieces, or can you rely on them, or are they broke? And they'll come back to you with some sob stories. So in terms of the due diligence on the property, there's a few things that you want to do. You obviously want to check the books of the seller, why they're selling. Sometimes they tend to, let's just say, overestimate or overpromise on the income, and they kind of scale back on the expenses, which makes it look like this is a real great deal. So what you want to do there is that you want to look at their tax returns, because very few people overinflate their income on their tax return, and very few people underestimate their expenses on their tax return. So if you can go look at their tax return, you have a good idea whether they're telling the truth or not. And you may want to walk through the house or the property and look for any deferred maintenance. Maybe speak to some of the tenants to kind of gauge what kind of landlord, if there are issues with the property, with the area. That's something you may want to check out. So there's a lot of things that you can do, that you should do prior to signing on the dotted line. Again, really important to make sure the financials are in place, that what they're telling you is in fact true. They're not cooking the books, and putting what they call a lipstick on a pig, and really find out what the reason that's driving them to sell. Because sometimes they're just trying to get rid of this property, and you could be the unfortunate person left holding the bag. But I'm assuming, again, I don't want to put negativity here. I just think that it's important, buyer beware. Makes it really important for you ready to do your due diligence on the property, on the neighborhood, your partner, to make sure that you're going in with this thing with your eyes open, and then you know exactly what you can expect, and there are no surprises. So I may do a session on that one. So I've kind of give you my thoughts on some of the things to look at. If you want to book a one-on-one ready, I can really go down to a lot more detail. And I can go through the due diligence that I would do if I was in your shoes, and go step by step and check it out. So if you think that'll be of value to you, ready, just book a one-on-one. I'll do the best that I can there. That would be great if you could do a session on that. Yeah, I'll try and do a session. I'm not sure when, but if there's interest, if anybody else wants to think I should do a session on partnerships or even multifamily, because I tend to focus on more single family. But if you want a session on multifamily as well, I can also do another session on that. Just let me know. Give me some feedback. I try to pick interesting topics that I find interesting, and topics which I think that you would also find interesting, and hopefully will learn from. I really do enjoy learning. I've been doing this live stream now for over 3 or 4 years, and I've learned so much just by preparing for this. And there's just so much about real estate that you can always learn something new, and that's what I always try to do. Okay, so I'm going to try and wrap it up in a few minutes. So again, if you got some questions, put them in the chat box, and I'll try and get to it. Otherwise, I'm going to wrap it up for the day. And hopefully this was an important, interesting session for you. Hopefully that you learned something. And I know next week we're going to have another session on a different topic. And I'm excited about real estate. I see there's lots of opportunities as the economy is kind of stuttering. If you have your act together, if you have your financing together, you have your criteria in place, then I think that there's going to be some really good opportunities that's going to be coming in for the next few months and years. And that you can, especially if you can hold and ride out the storm, then history tells us that, the market will come back, prices will, come back. And hopefully you'll be a recipient of a great property that you bought at a discount, or you got a great deal when there was less competition. So when the competition is less and people are fearful, that's the time to kind of go in and kind of hold on until the market picks up. Thank you for your advice. You're welcome. Ready? And so on. So I think I'm going to call it a day. A couple of things I need to do tonight. So I'll just wrap it up. So hopefully it was a good session for you. And I'll see you next Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time with another Ask Dr. Joe session. Again, if you want to book a one-on-one with me, just go to my website, joe@joeasamoah.com, joe@joeasamoah.com. And you can always email me at a question or a comment at joe@joeasamoah.com, joe@joeasamoah.com. But that's it, my friends. Have yourself a wonderful evening. And I will see you next Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Take care. Bye for now.